Are you listening? Damn. Yeah. Yeah.
Another episode of Trash Talk. I'm TJ O'Connor. With me, as always, Damian the Wolverine Hill. Trash Talk is joined again by Lawrence Pearson. First, got to go over the sponsors of the show: Valhalla Combat Sports Incorporated, Ink Shrinks Tattoo, Origin Wellness CBD, Spartan Martial Arts, The Striking Institute, James Clark Sports Psychology and Hypnosis Therapy, The Fighters, and my mom. Lawrence, thanks for joining us again. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing good. Just got done teaching, so it's a good day.
Yeah, I appreciate you for taking the time out to speak with us, especially while all this kind of craziness is going on right now. And one of the topics that we had talked about the first time that we had you on the show was your experience as an MP and being in the battle zone and things like that. And with the current situation going on right now, I was interested to have you on to kind of talk a little bit more about that and kind of compare to being a military police officer and having, I guess, the Geneva Convention and the rules of engagement and all of those things looking upon you versus what a police officer in the States has to answer to. And I kind of wanted to get your insight on it, especially with your experience just as a martial artist, one, an MP2, and with everything going on, I think the combination of the two gives you another level of understanding of the situation. I just kind of wanted to get your opinion on things. Now, I guess to start it off, what are some of the rules of engagement or requirements for you to actually take action against someone in a combat zone, or even against someone, an American service member that you might have to arrest?
Yeah, usually the start of every shift, there's usually a review of what's going on in the day, what's the threat con level. So then you have the intel that's given to you from your commanders or your platoon leader or your squad leader all the way down to the team leader. So they share what the threat con level is. What type of arms that you might encounter, what type of hostility you might encounter. And so you have different levels of force, which is hands-on sometimes, where you're not trying to kick, box, and box, but stop the threat with your hands if need be. If a person has a weapon, then you always want to go that one up usually. A lot of times you're not sitting there trying to play mano a mano. So person has a knife, maybe you have a gun, that type of thing. If it has to do with maybe they have a knife, maybe you have your baton. All depends on, do you feel the threat is needed to either go to hands, the baton, to your pistol, or your rifle?
I guess it's all kind of like in the moment, but how does somebody determine that? Is it anything written down on what has to occur before you believe that is a threat, or is it just you guys rely on your training?
You rely on your training because as military policemen, we go through basic training, which is 8 to 9 weeks, and then you don't get any time off. You go right into the military police school, so your mind is wrapped around that. So you start learning and knowing what you're capable of. That's what also you have to be able to make that choice. You have to be able to assess that situation. Everybody will assess a situation differently sometimes. There is an excessive force too, where if a person has no weapon and you choose to pull your gun, then that might be excessive, but it might be excessive.
Sorry about the inconvenience, everybody watching. There was a technical difficulty, but Lawrence, could you continue with your answer? I'm really sorry about that.
That's all right. So we're talking about the different levels of force. So my level of force might be different from a person that's 115 pounds, where they may grab their baton before I would, maybe I'd go hands-on and try to possibly take down or subdue an individual and handcuff them. And this is talking about back in the day when I was an MP, all the way back in 2005 and 6, during my last years of 2005 and 6. So that's what I'm talking from, is my experience. So it could be different where a person that doesn't have training, that doesn't trust their hands-on experience, they go straight to the baton beforehand. There's no severe written rule that I ever remember that was like, you can't pull your gun at this moment, you can't do this at that moment. But if you pull your gun, you better make sure that you're getting into the, controlling that situation, or that this is needed or warranted. If you feel that you need to pull your gun, you have to assess the threat. What's next threat that person might move to.
Okay, so what are the consequences? Let's say you pull your gun and you don't fire it. You pull your gun and it wasn't necessary. What are there consequences for actions like that?
I would say I would have to say, through my experience, no. I pulled my gun and one time in Hungary, and because we were outnumbered. We had a couple extra guys that we're outnumbered. There are some soldiers, we didn't want to shoot anybody, but it was like, hey, that threat was, hey, there's 3 or 4 guys right there. There's no way I can go hands on. There's no way I can do a baton. We didn't have pepper spray, part of our carrying MTO. It was like, hey, we had a baton, we had our 9mm and a radio. That was it. So
how far does it have to go before you would have to be justified in firing your weapon?
If you feel like your life or others' lives that you're protecting is in danger.
So that's pretty much the same as the American police force comparison. I mean, if they feel like their life is in immediate harm, they have the right to pull out their gun and use it, right? I mean, I believe that's right.
Yeah, if there's imminent danger, there's somebody with a weapon, or there's going to be a loss of life that you're trying to, stop from somebody else being hurt, that's when you would pull your weapon. Obviously, you're telling them to stop. You're telling them either, at the MP, we used to say halt 3 times, and, then things could happen, where every situation is different, because being an MP is totally different from being a civilian police officer, because you're either fighting or you're fighting as a combat soldier, or else you're doing what we call law and order, or doing garrison work, So it's always been so different. When people try to compare a military police to a civilian police officer, it is different. Definitely. It is definitely different.
But I want to give TJ an opportunity to ask a question as well. But okay, what would be? I mean, I don't know how much experience or how much knowledge you have about the American police force, but what would be the biggest difference that you would say?
Well, we're combat trained soldiers, so we're trained to kill also, shoot center mass, stop the threat. Just like they are. I can't speak for a civilian police officer, since I was not trained as a civilian police officer, but we're taught, if you pull your gun, that's the enemy, a lot of times, and you're going to shoot,
Okay, yeah. I mean, that's a lot to hold, I guess, like the knowing that you can ultimately end somebody's life. And I guess one of the biggest things that I've talked with people off camera, just through Facebook messages and things like that, but the repercussions for a civilian police officer versus a military police officer where there's foul play involved. I don't exactly know too much about the punishments of a military police officer, or of anybody who's in the service who's found guilty of, foul play. I don't know any specific.
Well, the same crimes do exist in the military. There's, anything that's been done in civilian life can be done in the military, because the military is just basically a subculture, or just like another state or another city. You're going to have people that have done drugs, people that are drunk driving, you're going to have people that rape, murder, whatnot. We're held, when I was in the military people are held to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. I believe that's the correct term for the UCMJ. And so, your commander can put you up on charges sometimes if it doesn't need to be judicial, where they can give you extra labor, dock your pay, things like that. And then there's different levels that it can escalate to. So if you get caught drunk driving, yes, you can a UCMJ action, or you can be charged with hey, you're going to have to go to a court and they're going to determine your fate. I don't know or have ever ran into it where it's like, okay, for this infraction, this is how many years you get or how many months you get. That is all determined by the judge and also the jury, so forth still.
How does that work in the military?
Yeah, so you can be arrested or detained, then arrested by the military police, and then just like you get your lawyer. JAG would supply a lawyer for you, and then there's another part of the JAG that you have a prosecutor, you have a defender, whatnot, and you have your judge and whatnot. I haven't had to be part of a court martial, but just like being almost in a civilian world, it can you get to tell your side, and you get your judge, and if it goes to a jury, then it's voted on also too. And sometimes it might not get that far. Maybe it might be the commander can give out certain disciplinary actions. It's kind of hairy. It's all I remember is when I was in the military is, okay, you do this or you don't do that. If you do this, you shoot somebody when you're not supposed to, because just say that you thought this person had a gun and you weren't really sure, but you said, oh, screw it, I'll still shoot him. That's not that is totally wrong. Just if you thought somebody had a gun or you thought somebody was doing something wrong and you shot, and then you're totally wrong, then yeah, you can be brought up on charges and you could be facing life.
Wow. So the thinking that somebody has a gun isn't enough. Like, do you actually have to see it? Because like, let's say I want to play devil's advocate. Let's say
Mm-hmm.
I believe that what they have is a gun, and I believe this person to be a threat, and it turns out to totally not be a gun. I mean, would I still be potentially facing charges if just because I was like, well, I thought so. Even
There'd be an investigation. There'd be an investigation. It's not going to be like open and shut, boom, you're guilty that far or that fast. There'd be an investigation by the CID. Those are the criminal, they're not criminal, but they are, the CID is an investigation division that the military has also. And you also have military police investigators. So they would investigate, hey, this is what happened. Are there any witnesses? Because in the military police, you work in teams, sometimes as two-person teams or three-person teams. And very, very few times are you by yourself unless you're the supervisor of that, if you're working in a garrison. So you'd have possibly people that are your witnesses, and they take statements, and just like going to a DA, you still have to go to somebody that's going to reread this report and then come to a conclusion on, yes, this person did this without thinking, or no, they're not guilty. This could have been perceived as a person had a weapon or not.
Yeah, is this something to where, and like you said, it's not something where you've been firsthand a part of this,
No.
but I mean, one of the big takeaways here is we see where when they commit these crimes, and even on the off chance where they do get charged, we see so much where there's acquittal, and there's so much they might get fired, but then you always hear about the police union and how much they're working, kind of like the brotherhood to protect them even when they're doing wrong. In the military proceedings, you mentioned, you're out there on a team. Is that something that you think would be a factor, or with the possible sanctions of, being dishonorably discharged, or like you said, being court-martialed themselves, do you think it tends to be more of a situation where they're willing to put the situation out there in truth rather than protect someone that might be, their friend, their brother?
Mm-hmm. Once again, that's the difference between me knowing anything about the civilian law enforcement and knowing about military police. There is a team and there is a bond, but it all comes down to the individual, just like where we are today in America. You have good MPs and you have bad MPs. You have good cops and you have bad cops. It's up to the person that considers himself a good person of law enforcement or a good person in nature to stand up to what they see as wrong. No matter what type of line there is, whether it's a green line, the blue line, whatever it is, that person has to look inside of themselves and do the right thing. And that's so I can't talk on what anybody else as a military policeman has done or what's done. There's been some, I have friends that have, gone through some questioning, whatnot before as military police. And, it's not about, man, I got to protect my boy so he doesn't do this or that. It's, it's up to that individual to stand up for what is right.
Yeah. And one of the other big stories, kind of question that I really wanted to ask once Damien mentioned that we were speaking tonight, one of the big things and one of the big quote unquote solutions you see here is, oh, well, these cops need to have some sort of martial arts training. They need to be, they need to be knowledgeable in hand-to-hand combat. As Damien mentioned beforehand, a lifelong martial artist, military policeman. And if you guys haven't watched the last interview, go watch that again and hear some of the stories. You were actively fighting while overseas on duty. Did you notice, per se, in your own personal experience, that you could see how your level of engagement, like you were speaking about earlier, would be different than other officers who might not be willing to do that extra step and learn that they might be a little bit more timid? And do you think ultimately it could help with the martial arts training, and maybe it's not 2 hours a week, whatever it may be, just a basic knowledge at least to prevent some of these situations from escalating to where guns need to be drawn?
Right. Yeah, I believe that military police and also civilian police should do more martial arts training. I know the Army, as I was getting out of the Army, they started coming out with Army combatives. So that was teaching people more martial arts. That's a total positive, because they're learning jujitsu techniques, they're learning wrestling, they're learning striking, whatnot. And then for police, like I said, I don't know how much training they put on their self-defense or on a martial art, but I think everybody needs to do more, because martial arts gives you that confidence. It lets you take a situation and sort of, how martial arts is, since you guys are both martial artists, you can sort of step outside of your body and slow it down just for a second. And more experience does that with the more times you fight, more times you spar and train. And so I think that would be very good for police to have it part of their training curriculum, which, like I said, I haven't talked to a lot of my buddies about their martial arts training or how much defense arrest tactics that they're doing. But I think that, hey, it should be mandated possibly a couple times per month or one time per week. I think that as important as physical training is, because doing push-ups, sit-ups, going to the gym, I think that police don't do enough of that, period, and so why not put martial arts and physical training in there, because we know the benefits of martial arts, weight training, cardiovascular training, what it does for us, and it gives you that confidence. So that means if you have that confidence, you can think through situations possibly easier.
Yeah. Oh my God, I definitely agree with all of that. I mean, I okay, and I don't mean to backtrack either, because we kind of moved on from the point, or from the subject, but one of the things that I was questioning or wondering a little bit about was I'm not asking you to talk about the civilian police force, because I mean, I just want to state that there are some inconsistencies with some of the reports that do come out, and that's just something that we know has happened, but we don't got to get too in depth with specifics. But how do inconsistencies in reports for MPs or for witness statements and things like that play a factor in the military?
Well, same way that it can play a factor in civilian life, that's one thing, because we've seen people get acquitted because maybe they didn't take down the right information when taking down a statement from a witness. It's the same exact thing. We have to make sure that in the military, we took a lot of time and learned how to do the MP report form. And we hated it so much because you had to handwrite it in black ink, had to dot your I's, cross your T, and if it wasn't right, the instructor would cross it out, do it again, read over the story again, and get it right, and that was something that they really harped on, is getting it right, because these are people's lives that we're supposed to assist, protect, and defend. That's what the military police is supposed to do: assist, protect, and defend. So I can't possibly do my job if I'm like half-assed doing it. You know, you have to do it the right way, because you don't want somebody that's wearing the U.S. Army or military's uniform because you messed up, either go to jail or get dishonorably discharged, or the person get off for an actual crime against another soldier, you know? Yeah. So you have to, no one can be perfect. That's 100%. But you have to strive for perfection as much as you can. And if you have a buddy or a partner with you, we always call them battle buddies, even though that was our partner. My battle buddy, I'm like, hey, read this over 2-3 times if you have to, because we want to make sure we get this right. And even if you got to read it 6-7 times, you do that, you know?
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. I feel like that goes into a lot of what you were saying when you were answering TJ's question too. Just, I mean, being able to step outside the martial arts mentality, and then also all the training and knowing that you guys need to get everything right, because you don't want to end up punishing or letting somebody get away for, I mean, these are American soldiers that you are either punishing or let get away with other crimes against other American soldiers or against other civilians in other countries, you know? I mean, and I think you speaking on giving 100% or striving for perfection, and also being a lifelong martial artist yourself, puts you in a position to be just a little bit better than everybody else. And I feel like what you were saying, like what the police do for their physical training and for their martial arts training isn't enough. And I would love to see some reform in that, and at least just some basic education. If every police officer got to at least a blue belt or a purple belt, and along with their training in school, because I can't remember how long, I think it's 2 years maybe, or 2 years in Minnesota to become a police officer. I'm like, the whole time you're training to become a police officer, be learning some jiu-jitsu. That way, not even to know how to choke a person out and kill them, so you know when not to, or when you are actually doing it, that, oh, this is more dangerous than what it seems. And we don't got to get into all of that, but it's just it's practical. It's very practical to be learning jiu-jitsu as a police officer.
And it can save their life on teaching them how to at least do defensive techniques. Maybe somebody's trying to beat them up, you know, maybe it's not about subduing somebody. Maybe it's to protect their head, their life, and whatnot, you know. That's very important, because to take you to a story on where it was levels of force, I remember there's 2 guys that are staff sergeants that had been in the Army longer than I have been. And I remember I just got off shift, and there was a soldier that came up from Bosnia, and he was either high or drunk on something. And these 2 gentlemen that were also my supervisors, they couldn't take the guy down. They couldn't subdue him properly. And I'm just sitting there like, man, how long is this going to go on for, you know? And they couldn't get this little guy that was 150 pounds. One guy, the other guy was 175. The other guy's well over 200. They couldn't control him until the 3rd MP came in and finally helped him out, you know. Should have taken 2 of them to safely subdue him and then apprehend him. But it was just like, wow, it looked like a mess. They're all over the place when it could have been taken care of.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and that just goes back into just, if you have more martial arts training, I mean, the better, I mean, hopefully the better it could turn out. But also, sometimes just guys are too much sometimes too. I mean,
oh, yeah, that kid was a lot.
We have this term. I hope it's not inappropriate for anybody listening because of the subject that we're talking about, but call it crackhead strength. And I fought a few crackheads before, man. I think CJ Hayes has probably had the best story about it, but that's another episode for another time. And I mean, Lawrence, I really appreciate you for taking the time to talk with us right now and to explain the differences just from your standpoint, because we spoke on it multiple times that none of us are civilian police officers. We're just here getting the story from you and getting the comparison. And I mean, I thank you for taking the time with us. I really appreciate it.
Hey, I thank you guys, and keep doing the good work that you guys are doing. I appreciate you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Fans watching, like this video, subscribe to Trash Talk with Damien and TJ. Don't be a hoe.